for Sustainable Energy Transition and Inclusive Development in the Caribbean. My name is Brian Constantine, Project Officer for Energy at the CARICOM Secretariat. I'm very much pleased to have you join us for today's webinar. This webinar marks the fifth installment in our November series of knowledge sharing events, which are designed to foster deeper regional dialogue and strengthen collaboration on sustainable energy development. I would like to emphasize that these webinars form part of a comprehensive program of activities organized under the overarching theme for CARICOM Energy Month, which is Innovate, Sustain, Leading the Charge in Renewable Energy Frontiers. We are very much privileged to have with us distinguished experts in the field who will provide valuable insights and guide us through this very important topic. Our moderator for today's session is Dr. Norwell Hines, who is a researcher, development practitioner, and social impact innovator. His current research focuses on how everyday life depends on access to energy and how technologies, institutions, and household realities interact to shape whether people can use energy reliably, affordably, and with dignity. He is currently the director for the University of Guyana's Institute for Energy Diplomacy. Currently, he is an energy and mobility advisor for the sorry about that. Joining us as our keynote speaker is Dr. Netra Chetri, who is a professor of sustainability and development at Arizona State University's School for the Future of Innovation in Society, and he serves as a council member of Nepal's University of Science and Technology. We also have Dr. Mahendra Kanai, who is a researcher and power systems engineer. And finally, we have Mr. Patrick Etwaru, who is also a researcher and chemical engineer whose work covers green technology and biomass conversion. Their insights today will help us get a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges ahead. I will now hand you over to Dr. Hines, who will moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. I want to thank everybody who's joining us also on this webinar this morning. This webinar explores biofuels as a frontier of renewable energy innovation in the Caribbean. And here we wish to examine both their technical potential as well as the governance frameworks needed to ensure that they provide genuine relief for communities as well as achieve sustainability goals. Biofuels could cut transportation or transport emissions, provide economic benefits, and enhance energy security for off-grid remote communities, including communities that are dependent on agriculture or forestry. So the webinar today will engage stakeholders such as you who are joining online and policymakers potentially who are online, students who are online, potentially industry leaders, researchers, and anyone else who's online. The idea here is to allow our presenters to draw on some of the emerging research, including their own research, and the policy developments that are taking place in and outside of the region to highlight practical opportunities for integrating biofuels into national energy strategies, particularly with a focus on small-scale, community-embedded production models that support local resilience. Our first speaker today is Professor Netra Chetri. And though you heard a little bit about his background, I think it will be remiss of me not to give you something a little bit more detailed. As you heard, he is a professor of sustainability and development at Arizona State University, among many other things that he does. You also heard that he is the chair of the program in innovation, the PhD program in Global Development and Innovation at Arizona State University, and he is a council member of Nepal's University of Science and Technology. His research examines how innovation emerges and diffuses across communities and how it contributes to sustainability, institutional innovation, resource governance, livelihoods, and climate adaptation. Lately, he has also promoted innovations in climate-smart agriculture among smallholder farmers in South Asia and the African continent. He does this while studying how policy and institutional barriers hinder the scaling of those local innovations, and especially local innovations to address energy and climate challenges. This research has appeared in leading journals around the world, including the Association of American Geographers. He is a geographer by training, applied geography, etc., and has also been featured where he has been a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and their assessment reports 3, 4, and 5. He's also the author and editor of Human and Social Dimensions of Climate Change and serves as associate editor for Politics of Technology, Frontiers in Political Science. I can go on, but I want to give you the opportunity to hear from Professor Netra. We're going to hear from him first. Just some housekeeping rules. We want to ask you that are joining us first to mute your microphones. If you have questions, be sure to post those in the chat. We will come to them towards the end. We have 3 presentations this morning rather. Professor Chetri will lead, followed by Patrick Ketwaru, and then Dr. Mahindra Kanai. I will subsequently introduce both of them. Professor Chetri, I want to hand the floor to you. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Norwell. Let me share my presentation, and good morning to everybody who are joining this very important sessions. As you heard, I'm here at the kind of a very early morning, and I don't know what is happening to my end.
This seems to be correct. We're seeing your first slide.
Okay, I'm just trying to get something worked out for me here. Bear with me. Okay, good. So it's going to be very short presentations. I know the small island nations, the Caribbean, CARICOM island countries, and so on, have a few challenges. They also have the opportunities. The challenges is that as being an island nation, they are kind of challenged with, or they have to deal with the threats of climate change. That's why they are called vulnerable to changing climate. But at the same time, as being in the equatorial belt largely, they also have a huge bio resources or vegetations and so on. Those can be converted into source of energies. And at the same time, these are also the nations spend a significant amount of their GDP, as much as 15% of their GDP to fuels and so on, and imported fuels. During the time of economic volatility, climatic threats, when those supplies are disrupted, these nations also then bear the burden of managing their energy supplies. So that is where the innovations in biofuel can be seen as a potential way forward to enhance their resilience through the use of the renewable energies. But when we look at the other numbers at the larger small island developing states and so on, large number of their population does not have access to modern electricity. As much as 40% of the population still cooks on woods and or traditional energy systems and so on. That is kind of unfair by knowing that they do have a resources, these nations, but yet are not able to convert that resources into reliable source of energy supply. And that brings us to the point of coming up sort of a better way to tackle these things. Again, they have to probably, these island nations might have to come up with a different answer to their traditional problems. That answers must have come from within the states themselves, not from outside. As I said earlier, their import dependence make them vulnerable. This to climate shocks can disrupt their distributions. But then, as being island nation, as also being communities dispersed in hinterlands and so on, those kind of settings needs a sort of a firm, dispatchable renewables, and which can be supplied through biofuels and so on. This sits with the abundant supply of biomass, and that could be not just a source of, could be frontiers and source of regions as well. So, but at the same time, the island states or CARICOM regions also has a huge amount of waste or residues, and that can be converted into a feedstock to energy supplies. For example, they have sugarcane bagasse, coconut husk, sawmills, afghats, and agro-processing residues, as well as municipal organic materials. So we don't have to actually compete these into other supplies. We don't have to convert like some nations does. They convert their soybean and corn into ethanol. The CARICOM nations or island nation doesn't have to do that. They can all use the residues to convert that into fuel. The biofuel actually fits nicely into supplying energy through the power lines, supporting the transport as well, such as ethanols to their fleets and ferries, and also can be a source of energy for off-grid locations, particularly into the highlands and rural communities. The stored fuel can be a source of energy during the time of disruption as well. There are quite a few success stories around the CARICOMs. For example, the Mauritius bagasse supplies more than 30% of the grid electricity. What is coming up in Belize is the Belcogens, which is the over 30 megawatts source of energy derived from sort of a bagasse and other biomasses, and that supplies energy to the grids. So they also, some of the nations have using, some of the tariff systems, the climate funds, and so on to support these new innovations, and as well as new ideas to supply energy during the time of crisis and so on, creating rural jobs, energy plannings, and so on. But at the same time, some of these bio crops are, the crops are not supplied throughout the year. For example, bagasse or sugarcane byproducts can be available up to 6 to 8 months. So we do need some other alternatives for that too. There is a momentum in the Caribbean. So in Jamaica, bagasse cogeneration power plant is supported by Inter-American Development Bank. So it is up and coming. In the case of Barbados, landfill biogas and waste to energy pilot projects are underway. In case of Guyana, rice husk and sawdust co-firing plant is under testings and is about to start. In Trinidad and Tobago has a similar story, biodiesel from used waste cooking oils and so on. Right. So, but then the the small island nations, as well as the island around the Caribbean, has the huge amount of lessons to learn from other global South countries as well. In the case of Philippines, the national blend of biofuel has rising from 3 to 5%. And in the case of Brazil, sugarcane ethanol power vehicles and grid cogenerations, as well as in the case of India, SATAT initiatives had supported 5,000 plus waste to biogas projects across the country. So these are some of the success stories that small island nations can also learn from, and then use that in some forms or not. But there are some constraints as well. For example, most of the biomass are weight. They are bulky. They are costly to transport. And then since they are weight, they have the potentials to be biodegraded very shortly as well, in a short period of time too. They have a seasonality. As I said earlier, sugarcane bagasse is not available throughout the year, but then we do have the ways to manage that. And at the same time, small plant, less than 10 megawatt in capacity, kind of incur some kind of a high initial cost, which requires some sort of a special private or a public financing and so on. Most importantly, community has to be in part of designing some of these features, some of these projects, because engaging them early on can be a sort of a win-win situation. But if you just put them into the dark, some community probably then react because of the local pollutions and so on, right? It also demands governance. For example, we have to think about using the residue, not the new crop or new forestry resources. We have to also think about some of these bioproduct or some of these residues are converted into incorporated into soil to protect the soil health. So we have to make sure that certain percentage of this residue continue to go back to the soil so that the soil is not depleted. And we also have to think about fair tariffs and the benefit sharings. In the case of Philippines and some other countries, up to 5% of the revenue that is generated from new initiatives goes back to the communities. And in case of Mauritius, can growers with bagasses also get some revenue back to their community. So we've got to come up with the sort of innovative governance policies so that the systems become sustainable and so on. At the same time, we have to come up with the new mechanism to finance some of these initiatives. For example, blended financing, the consensual loans, tapping into some of the climate funds, can also attract some private funders or private investment to come up with the new of the biofuel. At the same time, stability is really, really important. Nobody wants the uncertainty. So the stability and certainty in financing, the stability and certainty in generating energy and so on, going to be really, really important. At the same time, the island nations can also tap into the global carbon market or green bonds as well. And we should be very careful about how do we start the project. I will suggest that starting with some pilot projects, and then they can use some grants and some global finances to test the concept before scaling to a larger scale. So at the same time, we have to also think about harmonizing carbon biofuel standard in the nations, and then integrating into national development as well as national climate policies and energy plans. Got to start investing on testing some of these ideas at the small scale in labs, come up with the feedstock data. Each country has their own sources as well. And finally, we've got to invest on building the local skills and so on, homegrown local skills, so that the dependency is reduced. So just to wrap up, residues are not just the waste, they are resources for local resilience. Would be good in terms of increasing our energy resilience by tapping there. At the same time, there is some kind of a discourse that biofuel is not sustainable. It compete with solar and wind. It depends on whose discourse you are hearing. We think that it complement the solar and wind, rather than, because both solar and wind has their temporal dimensions as well. So biofuel can be a good complement for that. But we need to think about joint investments and so on. So I will stop there, and thank you very much, everybody. Back to you, Norval.
Thank you, Professor Chetri. I think a very comprehensive introduction, I would say, sort of a feature that allows us to go into the next presentation. Our next presenter, just to move quickly, because we want to get to the aspect of this that you guys are most interested in, and some key points and takeaways from your presentation, Professor Netra, included this idea of the competition usually, and how we are mitigating that competition between using agri products for food and using waste products or residues for fuel. So that food fuel kind of discussion, I thought that was very useful and important for us. And thank you also for bringing some global examples about how this could be done, and the leadership that those countries are showing in that regard. Our next presenter is Mr. Patrick Ketwaru. Mr. Ketwaru, soon to be Dr. Ketwaru, we're very proud of that. He is a researcher in chemical engineering. He's very well known in this field in the country, in Guyana, but also in the Caribbean region. His work covers green technology and biomass conversion, and his current research focuses on torrefaction of woody biomass for small-scale electricity generation, especially in remote or off-grid communities. I therefore want to invite him to respond in a sense by talking about some of the issues around technology and feedstock. Mr. Ketwaru, you've got the floor.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Professor. Good day to everyone who has joined us. I'll be looking at the technological aspect of bioenergy, because lots of people are not aware of the various technologies and so, right? So the first thing we have to do is look at the choice of conversion technology, right? So you have your feedstock, and then you have to decide, okay, how do I use this? What is the best? So it's the choice of conversion technology is basically based on the nature of the feedstock, right? We have generally feedstock can be biomass feedstock can be considered as either woody, non-woody, and this is for the vegetative type of material. And then we have the stuff that is animal-based. You tend to have lipids generally, which would be fats, but we don't use that too much for this. So what we're looking at is that trees, right? So we have sawmill residues, right? And also construction residues, like in Guyana, we do what we use when we do in concrete foundations and and other things, right? We have tissues, we have our farm boards and all that. When we finish with them, they basically just simply dumped or burnt openly, right? Which leads to increase in carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and other residues, right? Then we have non-woody feedstock, which is very, very underestimated and underutilized, right? And they tend to be very readily available. We have agricultural residues, municipal waste, especially the municipal markets. Those of us who go by municipal markets in the evenings when all the bins are huge, filled, right? We see them there, and then they take it to the dump, and it actually just simply breaks down into methane and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and those things, and it's lost. And it's adding towards the whole issue of global warming because, as we know, um, carbon dioxide as well as methane are very potent greenhouse gases, right? And it's becoming greenhouse gases without us being able to capture the energy that is inherent in these materials. So that's the whole idea of the conversion technology. You're converting it back to carbon dioxide, which has already been used up from the atmosphere anyhow. So that's why we have the cycle, right? It's a circular system, right? We also have seaweeds. We recently started getting, maybe over the last 10 years, massive issues with the sargassum seaweeds in the Caribbean, right? And also we have the used cooking oils. As we get more fast food places coming up, the amount of used cooking oil that is going to be available, right? So those are the kind of stuff we're looking at. Then we have moisture content. The moisture content is extremely important. Professor Netra mentioned this earlier in terms of you know, your normal vegetable, the average vegetable is nearly 95% moisture. So when you're fetching that to the dump site, you're actually fetching 95% water, right? Think about how much energy you're using just to fetch water that you wouldn't really want, right? Then you have to look at the physical characteristics of the feedstock. I was mentioning like the vegetative matter, whether it's the woody thing and all of that. And so all of those are important in terms of how you decide what technology you use. So let's look at the technologies that we could use now. So we have for non-woody, right? A high moisture feedstock. There's like our vegetable waste and so, right? You use biological, so you so it's really biotech. Well, actually, everything here is biotech. So we have biogas, bioethanol, which are fermentation technologies, right? Then there's a new technology which is extremely interested, and we at the University of Guyana is working on this, and it's something I would like to get more detail into, get into more work, right? But the equipment to do the work is a bit expensive, right? So we have hydrothermal liquefaction. This is where you heat the material at extremely high temperatures and pressures and convert them to biocrude. Remember, crude oil is basically biomass that was pressurized and heated for millions of years, and they became crude oil. Well, now we could now accelerate this process with the current biomass we have, right? And that would lead us to biocrude, which could be used as any other crude oil, right? But it would be renewable carbon in this case, so it's not going to add to our greenhouse, our carbon footprint. Right then, and from this also we get synthesis gas, which is mainly carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane, and a few other things that are combustible. So we could use that immediately for the combustion. Then we have the lipids, used cooking oil, right? And it's a chemical process by diesel. Then we have a thermochemical process also, which converts it to syngas, which I mentioned also. Syngas is also a very useful precursor chemical, so we could use it actually to make new chemicals, new materials, right? So it actually could become a chemical feedstock for chemical industry, right? And then we have this thing where we call sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically like jet fuel, right? But because the way it is, remember, they're all carbon, so you could convert the carbon to anything you want once you use the correct technology. Then we have woody, non-woody with low moisture content. So this is like bagasse and our sawmill waste and so. So you could get direct combustion, which gives you around medium temperature ranges, right? So it's then you have gasification, which It's done at high temperature, but the gasification gives you a gas that you could now use to power our the turbines or even generators, and so it depends on the technology used today. Then we have torrefaction. This is what I'm going to be focusing on. Low temperature, and this is between 200 and 350 degrees Celsius, right? Now, the advantage of torrefaction is because, as we were talking about, you have different, say, if I were to use, say, grass, and then I were to use, to say, corn stover, and then I were to use some residue from, say, a sawmill. They're all different and they burn differently, right? And they would convert to energy differently. But when you go through the torrefaction process, you make them all chemically uniform because the process of heating them changes the way they operate, right? So also what happens is increases the energy density of the material, right? Because it takes out the moisture, takes out some of the oxygen already in it. So you get more of a carbon base, which is very similar to lignite coal in terms of its energy values, its energy density. So basically, you could actually use this torrefied material as to co-fire a coal plant and those kind of things. So you don't have to get rid of your coal technology, but just simply your fuel now is a renewable source, or is a renewable, right? One of the advantages of torrefaction is that it makes the material in such a form that it does not absorb moisture readily, because it now becomes what we refer to as hydrophobic. It repels moisture, okay? And that makes it easy to store outdoors in the open. You don't have to worry if rainfall, you can't use your material, like what would happen if you were using sawdust or some other thing, right? And this enhances storage, as I said. It also, because it densifies it, right? You could actually densify it even further by compressing it into pellets. So you have little coal pellets generally, right? And that makes it extremely useful to do all kinds of things. That you could package it like charcoal, sell it. You could even, there are markets for this even in Europe. So we could actually create these markets in the small communities where they're being generated, and package them right there and then ship them abroad, or we use them locally, right? And I'll come to that, right? How we can do, and basically that's how we create a commercial commodity by doing torrefaction. So from low energy, low value biomass, you could now valorize it into a commercially viable commodity, right? And the good thing about this, it's that scalable. You could do it on a very small scale, and you could scale it up. And that's one of the things that we at the University of Guyana are working on, in that we're looking at developing these technologies for different scales. Right. So basically that's what I have
Okay.
done here, right? I'm messing. Let me see if I could move this one up. Yeah, right. So let's look at the social value. Environmentally safe disposal of biomass residue reduces methane, pest, dust. As you know, those of us who are in Guyana would be aware of the big issue we have with one of those sawmills in Essequibo. If they were to introduce this, they wouldn't have that problem, right? You utilize the residue at the source, which is important, right? So you don't have to ship it out and pay money to ship water, right? Provides reliable source of energy. We could now use the torrefied biomass to power small as 20 and 40 kVA generators, okay, which would be useful in small communities, right? So you could use that small gasified power generators, right? It's also something that people forget with solar and wind. That's intermittable. It's intermittent, and you need something like a base load. This system now, because it's generator based, it has the electrical and mechanical inertia, so that when a load comes onto the system, it doesn't back down. That electrical and mechanical inertia keeps the system going, so you don't get failures. And this also will be able to, with proper or judicious use of the energy at different times, you can actually now during the day use more of your renewables, right? Especially solar. And in the evenings, you tend to go down to, and evenings and nights, you then move on to the biomass-based things, and this is what we report as hybrid systems. Okay, so it allows that, right? And it creates and support local economic activity. So that's where I'm looking at it from the social value. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, I saw Brian hand come up there. Somebody was clapping, so I got distracted for a brief moment. But thank you, Patrick. I think that that was a very useful um, sort of dovetail with Professor Netri's presentation. Um, it was very, very useful, I think, to hear about some of the technologies available to us, some of the innovations that's available to us. I am very interested in your work with torrefaction and how that could be useful, and the small generator that you want to develop as a prototype and make it available. And I hope that we'll get the kind of support to do that. So I think that's very, very useful that people hear about that. You ended on a very good and useful topic again, dovetailing nicely into the next presentation, where you began to talk about social value. Of course, you highlighted some of the direct benefits for biomass and torrefaction in particular within small communities, small scale energy production within communities, especially agri communities and forested communities. So we want to pick up on that and continue on the question of social value. Now, looking at social value in a much broader context, as related to not just the environmental value that biomass might bring, but also the productive value, which is a component of social value. So in that conversation, we want to invite Dr. Mahindra Kanai. He's a researcher and power systems engineer, but his research in particular looks at how next generation energy governance can enhance social value, in particular productive value, improve resilience, and drive inclusive development in remote communities. His work has centered the concerns of indigenous communities in particular, and he's going to share a little bit about that with us. I should mention he's also head of department at the University of Guyana for electrical engineering department. So this is a good example of an engineer who understands the social context and who brings that engineering background, that attention to also these very important and significant social questions. Dr. Kanai, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Narwell, and our esteemed colleagues. Let me say good day to everyone, and trust that we can go through this to some level of detail. All right, so I'll be looking at alleviating energy poverty, transforming Guyana's indigenous community. And the first issue there is that sometimes you have to wonder, do we have, and this will be my presentation outline, what is energy poverty all about? And how does this whole biomass thing, biofuels, how does it interlock? So over 675 million people globally do not have access to electricity. And so the issue of access is major. And a few definitions give us from the WEF and the World Development Bank that if persons are lacking access, that is in the form of assisting in adequate supply, affordable, reliable, there is this notion that they are suffering from energy poverty. And so the issue now becomes, what is the state of our energy in the Caribbean in CARICOM. There are also some other definitions with reference to heating and cooling and not being able to satisfy your needs, and even those that go beyond 10% of your gross income, total income. But we'll not be focusing on that part, just the access. Now, the World Bank and the United Nations, they have implemented this chart where globally they've categorized electricity generation access into six categories. Tier 0 being no supply and no access, and tier 1 to 5 being the substantive supply. Now, what we can realize here is that right away there's a section, tier 0 to 3, that have no reliability, no quality standards, and affordability, and so on. And similarly, tier 4 and 5, while they have this, they have some steep marks in the sense of minimum of 16 hours and 23 hours supply, along with the quantum of power. And we can notice that these quantum for the lower tiers, 1 to 3, 3 watts per day or per hour per person, 50 watts. This is very small, like a television, like a phone charger, and so on, which is also depicted here. The tier 1, 0 is no access. Tier 1 access gives us energy just for lighting, basic lighting and phone charging. Tier 2, lighting plus like a fan, a television. Tier 3, probably some home appliances, a refrigerator, a microwave, probably very small. And look at the wattage. And as we go into these two tiers, we see that here now you can have productive use of energy. So this is why if we're going to add value with energy systems, we must ensure not only that we have access, but the quantum of access becomes important. So in a Caribbean context, or CARICOM context, whilst we are seeing, in a sense, most of our nation, or our CARICOM brothers and sisters, they have almost 100%, other than a couple few at the bottom. Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, surprisingly, Jamaica, Grenada, Haiti, and for the others in terms of Guyana, Trinidad, Jamaica, so they're 1% or a couple percentage that are falling short. Is basically those in the hinterland areas, outlying areas, that is away from the grid. So whilst it is not impossible, it is difficult because the communities are sparse and very, very small. So doing a big system sometimes is not feasible. So here again, and despite many of our neighbors have 100%, the issue now becomes quantity. How much power are they getting? So when you look at the per capita electricity generation, what we can see right away is that this bottom layer is falling below tier 4. So tier 1 to 3 is being captured by Guyana, right down to Haiti. And while many of these are the top, probably with the exception of Trinidad and Barbados, many of the others, while they're having a high per capita electricity consumption, the issue then becomes, what is the percentage of the manufacturing sector and the draw of organizations, government organizations, non-governmental organizations, the international community, how much did they use the hotel industry and so on, because we know that they will draw a huge amount. So basically, energy poverty is an issue in the Caribbean, in the CARICOM nations. So having understood this, we now move on to renewable energy system. My presenter would have covered biomass. So I just want to look at this community, what we did, terrain. We can always, I'm going to go very fast on some of this because just not to repeat and to focus on the social value, but just to show how we design a system. If we have a problem of energy poverty and we design our renewable energy system around that to be sustainable, we must ensure size. And then if we're going to talk designing for UN's tier 4 and 5, therefore we need a certain quantum and we need power almost 24/7, which is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the intermittent arrangement that we would have with the solar panels and solar array, we know in the nights, if they don't have adequate battery storage, they're going to have issues in the night. So that would drop you right off back to tier 3 too. And that is not acceptable if we want to promote development and so adding social value to community, improving well-being, right? And seeing people improve their lives. The additional part to this is that governance become a key issue, because in this whole question of sustainability, anything that cannot be maintained and the finances cannot be managed, what would happen? Eventually, systems will collapse. There isn't funds to do maintenance. There isn't funds even to ensure staff are paid, and eventually the system crumbles. So governance becomes a key issue. Good. So from the load side, what happens is that we did the surveys and so on. We got a domestic mean, and this is looking at their what they would utilize in their homes, looking at if they're going to do a business, and then you combine these two, and you have for 0 to 5 years a 6.1 average kilowatt per hour. And additionally, over the next 5 years, which is year 6 to 10, and then we combine. So these values will form the basis for which we can do various options of designing generation. And of course, with my electrical engineering background, we can go through the numbers and we come up with 1.2 megawatts, 2.5 megawatts, 3.5 megawatt, and 6.1 megawatt. And of course, we can look at Guyana, look at Wakapa, where it is up in region 2. Putting in the longitude, latitude, we get the DNI, which it says it's good, it's reasonable along the range. And we have the biomass capability because the community also does logging, right? Of course, you can use, if there's a community that has hydro, that has other forms of renewable energy, then that can also be substantiated. Good. So my design looks at CSP, biomass, and solar farms, PV farms. And of course, all three systems can generate the quantum of energy that we need. So there is no question of if the renewable energies can do it. And of course, I must say, whilst we can see the CSP and solar, you can actually see streams and issues with cloud cover or rainfall season periods. You can see that there's dips and some little other colors other than the clear purple. But with biomass, it's consistent. And I did this so that we can look at a hybrid system where in the day you utilize the solar and in the evenings you utilize the biomass. Solid purple representing good supply. Good. And of course, looking at costs, I'm just going to go these quickly. If we have questions, I can come back because I want to get to social value. Capital investment, which is reasonable biomass in comparison to PV, which is the cheapest, right? But it's very competitive, very comparable, and you can have very reliable power despite rain, despite issues with weather, night. The biomass system is there ready to produce, right? And it's very, of course, CSP is a very good system and have the other advantages in terms of providing employment and also a more efficient system that can work well with biomass. Good. So having looked at the use of energy in the community, 4.12 for entertainment, education, and business, we see that they require 18.36, which falls into tier 4. 16 hours minimum can give us 18, and of course minimum 23 will give us 20, can also give us in. So we're looking at a tier 4, tier 5 supply system. And if we're going to talk development now with these, and this would be the system where we combine the two, the solar in the sense CSP and biomass, where we can utilize the biomass when the sun is out in the evenings, utilize the biomass in the evenings. So the system can be a hybrid and of course can work very well together, but PV can also work. So onto the meat of the matter now, how having gotten and seen that here, yes, we can produce the energy. Yes, we can satisfy the needs of the community, and it depends on the option we choose, 0 to 5 years or the 10-year option. So there's no question about that. Now, the key finding shows that there are numerous benefits. There are numerous value that can be added to the community. And here, social value is a simple definition is where the benefits outweigh the burdens, the costs, and the risks. And these are the current occupation, let me say, of community residents. Farming is the predominant area, along with shops and then mining and logging. The idea, though, is that farming, whilst it's the major, how can electricity improve farming or even the farming products and the logging and all the activities that goes on currently? And here we see the potential of continuous power, 24/7 power, tier 4, 5 power availability and access, what it can do in the community. So we see, other than shops and so on, furniture making is a big item that can be done. All the hairstyling, farm irrigation, agro processing, sawmill operations. And so this community understand that if they get power and they have to pay a cost, then it becomes a burden. It becomes tedious. It becomes, rather than being something good, it ends up overshadowing the good, and it's been seen as a negative. So they have to utilize this power productively. And this is where social value comes in, by doing something. Even poultry, as we would see just now, it is very, very feasible. Now, from this operation, if we utilize the PV, jobs can be created on the line of around 297. If we utilize the CSP, we can have additionally 12 full-time jobs, along with many other jobs for wood collectors and the maintenance people who will clean the mirrors and so on. Now, the idea here is that we can have 300 plus 309 jobs created in the community. Now, what does that mean for a small community that is primarily farming based? It can mean a lot, because every person that is employed, you could add on 2 or 3 persons behind that as a family. And many of these families have 4 and 5 children. So I guess we get a picture. It will be helping to alleviate poverty in a massive way. Now, some of the costs, burdens, and risks, of course, every venture has some of this. Of course, the costs would involve capital investment, materials, wages and salaries, and so on. And similarly with burdens, if you're gonna get a loan, you might have to put down a collateral. You got to pay some fees. You got to undergo training, sacrifice some time. And similarly with risk, a lot of insurance and equipment damages, for equipment damages, warranties, and so on, security. But at the end of the day, does it make sense if you go this route and the financing and so on is available, which we'll see, is that from this, there were 31 persons that were interested in making juice out, and so we can go down the list and see 28 for sewing, 10 that were interested in shops, and as we go down. The idea here, though, is that we can see the productive nature or the economic value that it can add per month, per household, or per whoever is investing and doing this particular business. And this is the overall for the 18 or 21 or 31 number of persons doing it. And so for the year, you can see a generation of 778,000 US, or for all the businesses, 900. And this is just a face value. Of course, further research can be done to validate and to dig down, because the idea is not only getting power, but utilizing power productively. So many of our scarcities during, let me say, the dry season, these communities have lots of land, but they do not have storage. They do not have processing. They do not have adequate facilities, so that not only can they plant, but also to move their stuff quickly, chickens, doing it on a larger scale. So when, and this can help with price in terms of it being volatile in the market and seasonal. This can help to stabilize prices in a country, and especially in Guyana, where chicken price would move from time to time because there is a shortage or certain seasons shallot or tomato or peppers and so on. You get the idea, farming products. And along with that, it can open up numerous opportunities for youngsters, welding shops and general shops and all these little skills, IT, CIT, and education especially, which we're going to see. So how lucrative is this? And we can see for the sawmill operations that are current, these are very lucrative. They can generate a lot of funds. Poultry, right? And on a larger scale, we can see some of the shops and, of course, some of the businesses there being very lucrative. So social value can definitely be added. And of course, well-being and persons' lives can be enriched. Now, what this is showing is that in addition to the actual monetary or economic side, one thing we many times we forget is the knowledge transfer. There will be a lot of training that can be gathered, that can be harnessed, that can be received by the community, and this can also transform the community in itself. Because of full 24/7 hour power, they can now do a lot of educational courses online without even leaving their home, and this will make a big improvement, not only in their lives, but community and eventually Guyana and the Caribbean. Now, the big thing is financing. Where do they get this money? The project will cover the renewable energy system and so on, but where do families get this money? And they're saying that a very large portion of them cannot access financing. 78% cannot access financing, and they're willing to contribute to a fund where either it is given from our governments as soft loans. We have IPED. We also have, I think, Go Invest do some of this, and they would assist some families. But this can be done on a wider scale, and financing could be made available so that persons can invest and not only utilize power for entertainment or education, but can also generate value via economic activities, as we just see. Good. Now, the governance side is very touchy because many in the community in the survey would have indicated that they prefer to manage this thing themselves. But we know as much as a bottoms-up system of governance is always appropriate, there will have to be the item 4 and 5 along with the village councillors in the sense of the Tushao and also government representatives. Because this can be bigger, you have a full power generation system, you have a full community enterprise development base and looking to improve economically and doing other projects other than energy. You can also do water, they can also do roads and access and so on. So one can end up saying that here, they would also need government reps and also the Tushaos and the Armenian community management systems. So the governance side brings us to a few aspects, which is very important. One would be fund gathering, and Professor Netro would have talked about some of the public-private partnerships, and not only getting access, but also having reputable people help to manage this fund gathering process. And also in the implementation phase, there will be, we saw just for the plant and the systems, the energy systems, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, depends on which option we choose. So this is a lot of money in play, and this is US dollars. So we will need proper systems in place in the purchasing side and then in the construction, commissioning phases. Along with that, the operation and maintenance of the facilities, we see that we'll be hiring at least one manager, and you get shift operators, you got supervisors, you got persons collecting wood, staff, and who are overlooking probably the transmission, distribution, and so on. So there'll be a full staff, and there's need for operations and maintenance and management of these folks. And other than that, the community, if we're going to talk inclusive development, we also need the community to play a role in some way. And therefore, if we're going to be paying tariff, we're going to be having a fund that they can draw from to help improve and probably increase their economic viability. I think there is definitely need for such a system. So in concluding, we see that energy poverty is an issue. There is no question in CARICOM energy poverty is an issue, probably not as big, but in especially the remote areas, remote communities. Renewable energy systems offer a wide range of options, and based on the community, based on the resources that are available, the appropriate study can be done. But in this case, we see PV biomass hybrid or biomass CSP hybrid. And of course, there's huge potential for income generation and improving lives. Thank you. Yes, over to Norval.
Thank you, Dr. Kanai. I think that was very useful. And thank you for the work that you're doing, the research work that you did, that allows us to get this kind of detailed information. And I think the big takeaway from it is that this could be done. Hybrid systems are possible in remote communities. Just to say, for those of you joining us who are not so familiar with Guyana, Wakapao is an indigenous community in the country. It's in the hinterland regions of the country. So these represent examples of how biofuel or biomass could be integrated with solar power to deliver social value for communities. So that was the focus of Dr. Kanai's presentation. At this point in the webinar, and we are just over by about 10 minutes, but we will facilitate a couple of questions. There are a few that showed up in the chat, so we want to give an opportunity for those questions. There are two questions that we have in the chat. I'm going to read the two. This question comes from Mr. Jamie Hurtado Crespo, and he has submitted the question through LinkedIn. He wants to understand to what extent can this CSP model be applied in other Caribbean countries?
All right, so CSP is one of the solar, they come under the solar branch of renewable energy. And if I can just share back. There is usually a DNI that is, you have to be within the range of 3.8 and up. So like for Guyana, right? And you can utilize, there are some solar maps, heat maps that are available that can show your country or your territory where it is applicable. So like for this, it is more applicable in this brown burgundy area. So whilst everywhere gets sunlight, only at this point it gets over that 3.7, 4. And so we see at this location, we are about 4.7. So this is good. So yes, it can be applied, especially around the equator and any kind of desert, any kind of area. Actually, there's a NORS project that generates in excess of 500 gigawatts of power. And this utilizes all 5 methods of solar energy. There are 4 concentrated solar power methods, and there is the one, of course, PV, which is more common, but that is not the only one. So there are some ground rules. What is the requirement? And one is the DNI, direct normal radiation, being above 3.7 there. Trust that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Kanai. We have another question from Mr. Leighton Waterman, joining via LinkedIn also. Are there any examples of insurance for biofuel crops? And he says that he asks this question in the context of biofuel resource, like other ag resources, which can be affected by flooding. I want to pass that question to Mr. Ketwaru and Dr. Chetri, if you could also offer your information or knowledge on this.
Let me,
Thanks.
well,
Okay, go ahead, Prof. Go
no,
ahead,
I
Prof.
think I was going to say Patrick has already responded. We are largely talking about the use of residues, not the real biofuel crops and so on. That is the primary goal. But since the question is asked, like any other crop insurances, there must be a systems for biofuel crops too. Because if you treat this as a crop, like any other crop, the same insurance package that is applied can be applied to biofuel crop. But again, as Patrick has mentioned, we are largely talking about biomass waste or a residue that is generated by other primary industries and then using that to convert the biofuel. So I believe that answers the question.
Patrick, do you want to add anything?
Generally, no, but because there's just one thing, the whole notion of growing biofuel crops is not really very prominent or very well promoted, simply because you're going to have food versus fuel issues immediately unless you're using very marginal lands. So that's one of the issues. So you tend to want to keep away from crops, fuel crops, direct fuel crops, right? And use more residues. And if you're going to use marginal lands, then you could do things like elephant grass and so, which will actually promote the safety of the land, in that it prevents further degradation, as well as in some instances, if you use leguminous cover crops, right, then that can also help to improve the soil content, the soil quality. So that's basically the way I would look at it.
Just to add what Patrick said, early 2000s or so, there was a huge research done how biofuel crop also affected food securities and so on. The famous tortilla chips from Mexico's story is a good story to remember as well. So by now, the whole idea of using biofuel crops as a biofuel, it's more or less, I will say, not quite dead, but it is on a moratorium. And also, as Patrick said, I also used to do some research on sage grass, elephant grass, and other grasses, and so on as a biofuel. Yeah, they are a good source, but we are also gradually not investing so much on that. We're focusing largely on urban waste and other residues that are readily available. And in fact, they are a part of the problem right now. As they decompose, they generate methanes and other local pollutions, environmental pollution. So again, I would remind everybody that we are focusing on the residue and the waste, not the crop.
Thanks, Professor. And that's a useful reminder. And we are and especially in our context here in the Caribbean region, where there's a lot of agri waste, agri residue that we can utilize for these purposes. I want to turn our attention in that context to another question. It's more of a comment that Mr. Bascom has posted in the chat, Alistair Bascom. I'm going to read his comment, which has an implied question. Torrefaction can be used to make biochar, and he mentions that in Trinidad, they were investigating the use of cocoa to make biochar for fertilizer. Would rice husk be appropriate, or will that rice husk, sorry, would rice husk be appropriate, or will that be too low a feedstock for biochar? I don't know if you want to respond to that, Patrick.
Let me, I should,
Okay.
I should jump on this because I work on biochar as well. Yep, biochar is can be made from almost all biodegradable material, whether it's a low cellulose or a high lignins and whatever. And in Indonesia and largely in South Asia, they make biochar from rice husk. It's a very good source of soil amendment. The shortest answer is yes, rice husk can be converted into biochar, and it can be a great friend for enhancing the overall quality of the soil. Thank you for that question.
Just to add a little bit more to that, in Guyana, we have actually done work on biochar, rice husk biochar. We actually have a publication on that in which we're trying to tailor the biochar. We have a very strong thermochemical group at the University of Guyana Department of Chemistry. And so we have been doing some of those kind of stuff, right? And the thing is also, if we were to say start with the torrefaction and then use a gasifier or even direct combustion, when you use a gasifier, you're left with some char that is left back. That will be high in the elemental nutrients in terms like the metals and so that you need, right, to add to this to the soil, as well as you will have the carbon content. So when you pass the torrefied material through say a gasifier, there is still some ash left back that you can now take to your thing. So you're actually getting multiple bites at the cherry to be able to use different aspects of the biomass. So it's not just simply, it's a case of where you have a very nuanced approach to the whole issue, right? So it's a case of you have to look at your feedstock, look at the technologies applied and what you do with the various outputs from the technologies. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. That's useful. I like everybody likes that when your money multiplies, so to speak. When you get two benefits out of one sweet. And I like that approach where you're saying that we could not only deal with the energy issue through torrefaction, but we're also able to get from that some residue that itself could be used as biochar as in agriculture. So this is a very useful point to make. Mr. Hussein raised his hand. He has a question. We want to give him an opportunity to voice his question. I think the name is, I saw the name show up, but I'm not see. Shahad Hussein. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good day, everybody. Thanks very much, Dr. Noel, and thanks all the doctors for the presentation and CARICOM for this opportunity with Secret. Sticking to the point, Dr. Noel, with CARICOM, sorry, with Ministry of Agriculture and the phrase that you use. Just curious to know, from then to now, I mean, Guyana was known for two things. I mean, in history, for most estates for basically for sugarcane, and also for the large amount of sawmills, especially in the quarantine area. So my question would lead up to Gaisuku as to their biofuel. If am I correct, some time ago they did set up that system for ethane fuel, or maybe he might have like either one of the two. Somewhat being used in those high voltage operation cleaning and maintenance. And there was a, what do you call it? An initiative started off with the then minister for the vehicles, but the doctors can share some more on it and what the future looks in that area as in agriculture, as you mentioned.
Thank you for that question. I could reply directly to that because I was actually involved in the development of that project with Gaisuku quite a while back, right? It's actually straddled two agriculture ministers, Minister Ramsamy and Minister Robert Prasad, right? I can't remember under which one it was eventually implemented, but I think it was an IDB funded project, if I'm not
Robert Prasad.
Yeah, Robert Prasad. Yeah. So I'm not too. What had happened is that they were using it for a bit. I asked about it about a few months ago, and while the plant is still there, they had some technical issues that they had to address. And I think they had to bring in the manufacturer, because one of the things is that to make the regular, they were using the molasses from the Albion estates, and that was quite easy to do. But the issue to get to the blending, they had to do the dehydration, because we were getting about 90-95% ethanol from the regular distillation. But to blend it, you had to get it to absolute alcohol. And they were using a pour evaporation system, which is a very sophisticated technology by White Fox, right? And the thing is, what happens, you use specialized membranes, and these membranes have a particular shelf life. So I suspect they have to replace those membranes, and I don't know if there was a cost factor. So, but it's from what I know, it's a very simple a very simple system, because it was a pilot, right? And the most sophisticated part was the membrane dehydration technology, the pour evaporation, and that was quite useful. It was very good. As a matter of fact, I had a few students work with them to optimize the system from what it was there. So I am aware of it, and we did work a lot with it. And that pour evaporation system, it's very easy to fix once you get it, but that's the challenge they had, in that they were using the to blend it into gasoline. It has to be absolute 100% or 99.999% ethanol, because the moment you have a little bit moisture in it, right, you end up not being able to mix the gasoline with the ethanol, right? It has to be absolute ethanol, and there's a chemistry of the whole thing. Thank you.
It's not a technological issue. I'm also wondering whether, because the neighbor Brazil has mastered ins and out about all of these things, and they have been in the forefront of innovations for decades now. I think more than a technology, whether there is a political will or not. So it's more of a political economy rather than a technological innovations and so on.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Professor Chetri. Mr. Mangru, you have a question. I'm not sure that it was phrased in a way that I could represent it properly to the panel, but if you don't mind unmuting and asking your question. Mr. Rex Mangru. Mr. Mangru, you can unmute. Okay, he might have some difficulties unmuting, but the question surrounded investing, the investment analysis, and whether this was done
Okay, so I'm driving, so forgive me if I'm a bit. So the thing is, in terms of the investment, like for example, with the biomass, how would we, if someone want to invest, like public, I think Dr. Kanai shared on public-private partnership, how can investors get in terms of showing an actual dollar value, meaning if persons invest, let's say $1,000 US, how much return on that investment would they get in terms, like over a time period?
All right, so if I can take that, most utility companies operate on a low profit margin. So they actually make money based on the volume, because it's usually nationwide or territorial, a whole territory. Now, the idea here is not for investors in the sense of collecting dividends or value in terms of shareholders in that sense, but these are more utility-based community development projects. So the profit that is made, one of the concepts here is that if we're promoting remote community development, that profit can go into a fund which can then be utilized by the community members to access as loans to help them improve and buy more equipment or larger equipment so that they can scale up their business. So it's not really well, yes, private-public partnership, but it's more like how we have companies, they would sponsor cricket and they would sponsor football and they would sponsor sporting events. The benefit is not in the monetary side, but in goodwill and in promotion and name identification, companies being associated with the development of a specific community and so on. So it's not direct income or profit for the persons investing, like the government invest in roads and school and hospital and bridges. And we don't collect a toll as such, but it's part of development. Trust that this answers your question.
I would just like to add another perspective to that, because remember, we're looking at the commercial utilization of the biomass to produce the say the biocoal, which can be sold, and the return on investment is a function of how you plan your project, right? So when you look at your ROI, you have to have to do a detailed and economic study, right? And you would see, you'd look at your capacity and those kind of things, your uptime, the time you want for it to pay back itself, and your own internal rate of return that you are happy with. Whether you're happy with, usually, as Dr. Kanai was saying, is that normally with these small projects, they tend to be more CSR. However, it is one of the things that we're promoting in terms of use of biomass also, is that you can, as an individual, go and commercialize it. But then you have to look at the various aspects about it. And with all energy projects, because the upfront capital is so high, right? Because it's so high, it tends to take a while before you actually can collect back your investment and you have your full, but your ROI is what's going to help you. So return on investment is something you decide what you're happy with based on your amount of money you're putting in and what you're looking at. So that is another aspect to look at it from. And I guess Professor Chetri will be saying something on that.
Yeah, so additional aspect along with what Patrick and Mahendra mentioned is, we know that the term economy of scale. So financing is often a major hurdle for biofuel project, and especially if the scale is smaller, less than 10 megawatts and so on. So most project therefore needs a blended finance, so kind of a mix of concessional loan, climate funds, and private investment as well. So to reduce sort of a risk and attract investors too. But at the same time, there is a carbon market, that is not being explored and utilized properly. So that carbon market can provide extra revenue for reducing emissions too. So ethanols and then biofuels are great examples to that, while green bonds help bring in large institutional investors who wants to support clean energy and so on. So that is where we have to think about it. If we think in a sort of kind of a simple way, not much investors can be attracted, but then if you utilize green fund, carbon market, blended finance, and so on, and if we think about providing the service to the communities which has been marginalized for a long time, and there is the appetite for investment from all sectors, including the government too.
Thank you. I thought that was useful. And we're talking here about a community-based but utility scale interventions. And these, as was pointed out by our panelists, I want to distill three broad components. There's the financing of the initial startup of the project. But what we're talking here is about sustainable projects within communities that can be self-financing once that startup funds are available, because you're producing energy for productive purposes, which means there's a potential for community-based stakeholders to decide and set their regime for returns. And that regime could include a small fee that major users pay to that community-based utility, but also the sale of, as Patrick pointed out, pellets that can be distributed outside of the community for other um, uh, projects, biomass-related projects or energy projects in other areas. So I think that what we're saying, the key message here is that there is a potential and there is a sort of circular flow,
Yeah.
a circular economy when we talk
Yep.
about biomass and we talk about torrefaction in community-based utility scale energy projects. And we need to advance these kinds of conversations looking broadly at the financing arrangements and that kind of blended financing model, but also seeing that these have productive capacity, these enhanced productive capacities within communities and therefore have the potential to also offer some financial benefits or returns for those communities that invest in those things or governments that invest in those things in those communities.
Let me reemphasize Dr. Hines' point here in the spirit of collaborations and cooperations and so on. The regional collaboration or a regional cooperation is the key for building a strong and sustainable biofuel industry. Absence of that, it's not going to be that viable. But first, we need common biofuel standard across CARICOM. This kind of a thing help prevent fragmented market and makes it easier to trade within the region. That's what we have to think about. Second, including biofuel in nationally determined contribution shows a long-term commitment and help unlock climate finance for member states too. So third, CARICOM countries can share laboratory facilities for fuel testing and feedstock analysis and so on. This lowers the cost and ensures consistent quality across the region too. And finally, we must invest, the region must invest on training local technicians and operators so that skill and the value created through that skills stay within the island too. So together, these steps strengthen the regional collaborations and build a trust for future clean energy and with resiliency and a sustainability focus.
Thank you, Professor. I'm very glad you brought that in because especially the question of regional standards and so on. So thank you. We're coming towards the end. We can facilitate one question more, which will be the last one, which is directed to Patrick. The question comes from Mr. Calvin Bernard, who asks whether you can comment on the energy profit yielded from the various processes applied to biomass, given the energy inputs required. This is sort of connected to our previous conversation too about returns. I think people are wanting to get to the dollars, and let's talk about how we can make this happen, not just sustainably, but also that it makes financial sense. There's a business case, as it were, for biomass. Patrick, do you want to respond?
Yes, I can go there, but I just want to recognize that there is actually a deeper question in that. It's actually energy balance he's looking at. He's asking about whether or not and Calvin, you could tell us whether or not that is what you really were looking at, because from the way it's structured, I see you're looking at the amount of input in terms of the energy and the cost of the energy, what is the net output of energy, and whether or not we have a net positive balance. For torrefaction, yes, and for most bioenergy processes, yes, right. It just depends on the feedstock and the technology used. So there has to be that kind of analysis, right? Because you don't want to be putting in more energy or more money into a process than you can make after you finish getting your final product. So it's more, so the first thing you need to do is look at your energy balance, right? And are you using more energy than you are going to take out? The other thing too, because these are residual feedstock, right? You actually can use the feedstock itself to power the system. So in a way is that you're using the energy in the material to power the system. So once you get it started, the thing becomes where it is self-generating in terms of its own energy, and then whatever is left back is actually extra. So that's the whole process. The problem comes into play when you actually have to keep putting more energy into the system and you're not getting out additional energy. So that's basically, and once you're looking at the production of energy, you'd have to look at the economics as Dr. Hines was mentioning. So that's where it is. But it's really, yes, a net energy value. You must get a net positive energy output from the process. If you don't get that, you're wasting your time, you spin your wheels, drop that project and go to another one. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Seems
All right.
Calvin had a follow-up. He's asking, you want to say quickly, Mr. Bernard, what are the comparisons that you're looking for?
So thanks, Noel. Now, really curious about the relative profits between all of those among all of those processes. Which ones are yielding the highest energy profit, considering what has to go in?
All right. So if I can take that, I trust that you're seeing the screen. So if we look at the levelized cost of electricity from the biomass and the PV system, we can see biomass is actually the better system in terms of cost of operations. And we know commercial costs right now, we're paying like 25 cents, $50 thereabout a kilowatt hour. Just on average, probably 48 thereabout. But we can see that biomass is the better system in terms of cost, right? It actually does better than PV. And CSP is a bit higher because of the initial startup cost that is required, the startup that is required, right? So cost-wise, yes, biomass is very feasible. Our problem with biomass, I think in the West, is that we tend to have a negative connotation because of the effluent, the smoke, and so on that is given off. But biomass is usually considered a renewable energy source because it is termed carbon neutral. In other words, if the refuse and the biomaterials are left in the environment, they give off the same carbon, or they have the same carbon footprint as if you burn it. So for that regard, it is usually considered carbon neutral, despite it may seem as though you have a lot of effluent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kanai. And that's a good note to end on. We have done three things in this webinar, which I hope is appreciated by the participants, both joining us directly on Zoom, but those who are streaming on other platforms, including LinkedIn. We attempted to introduce biofuels as an innovation within the space of renewables, and in particular to sort of make a case for its prioritization when we talk about electricity sector energy transition, and more particularly when we talk about social value in agri or forested communities, agri-based or forested communities, especially where those communities are remote communities, hard to reach communities, because we're saying that the residue can add value. That residue can be used to generate electricity, and that electricity can be used in productive ways. So I'm glad that we also concluded with Dr. Kanai demonstrating that when compared to at least two other renewable energy technologies, that biomass has the lower levelized cost for its implementation. So we really feel that we have made a very good argument here, and we hope it was useful for you as a set of interested stakeholders who are joining us. I want to thank,
Norwell, just
yes,
just to reinforce your point, I think we made a really good argument. Since the pricing and the cost is keep coming, I think I want to remind everybody that first, unlike other, biomass is dispersed. It's kind of it's not a centralized thing. It's not one place. It's all over. So that also means that we need a fair pricing and benefit sharing. Like some communities make sure that some countries make sure that part of the income from bioenergy goes back to the community fund or farming, farmer cooperatives, and so on. A great example comes from Mauritius, where sugarcane growers earn money by selling bagasse to the grid. This shows how biofuel can support both inclusiveness and sustainability. And so when policies and are fair and are transparent, I think coming back to Norwell points, this conversation can take us to the next level. Comparing biofuel with other forms of energy or bioenergy with other forms of energy is a kind of unfair at this point in time because it serves many different purposes too. Thank you, Norwell.
Thank you so much, Professor. We're very glad to have these kinds of experts. I think we're going to have to think about, if CARICOM agrees, with the University of Guyana Institute for Energy Diplomacy, another forum perhaps dedicated to this conversation of biomass and innovations in energy, in renewable energy transitions in the region. So I want to thank all of you. Dr. Chetri, I want to thank you especially for taking the time to share your expertise. You're joining us from Arizona. I didn't mention that before, that is 3 hours behind Guyana. So Professor Chetri, to participate in this, had to be up since 5 a.m. this morning, and then to join the pre-call for us to make sure we have the technology and all that in place. So we really want to thank you for taking that time. I want to thank you, Dr. Kanai, for your intervention in this, for sharing your detailed work in this regard, and especially sharing the practical applications of this in the community case that you were able to share with us. And we want to thank Patrick Ketwaru, soon to be Dr. Ketwaru, who also did an excellent job in talking about the technologies that's available to us, and especially talking about torrefaction, which he's doing substantial research on, which is in fact the subject of his PhD. He is all but dissertation at this point in time. So he's just about to defend his dissertation thesis. But beyond that, I think anybody who is around the energy space in Guyana or the region is very familiar with the name Patrick Ketwaru and the work that you've done. So we don't need your PhD to know that you have this expertise. In fact, the PhD would be just complementary, really, to deep knowledge and experience in this area. I want to thank CARICOM for organizing this within the CARICOM Energy Month. I want to thank the Secretariat and particularly those who are responsible for the Energy Desk. I want to thank Ms. Britton, who I saw at one point on the call, on the webinar. So I want to thank her for taking time to also participate in this. I want to thank Brian Constantine, who has been very involved with us in helping to organize this logistically and technically. We want to thank you all for that. And I want to thank all of you as participants for staying with us. We have gone now 45 minutes beyond the time that we planned. So I think that might be an indication that either we were poor time managers or that the topic was very interesting. I prefer to go with the latter. So I want to thank all of you once again. Again, if you're interested, this webinar is available. The recording of it, that is available. And if you're interested in getting access to the recording of the session, please make a request via email to Sandra Britton at the CARICOM Energy Desk. or Mr. Brian Constantine at CARICOM.org. Thank you very much. This brings to an end this very interesting webinar conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hines. On behalf of the organizing team at the CARICOM Secretariat, we'd also like to express our thanks to the University of Guyana, the Arizona State